To Issues and Debates, Nature, Nurture. In this session we're going to look at nature and nurture, briefly discuss some examples, and then we're going to consolidate that next time in lesson. So nature, any influence on our behaviour that is innate is referred to as nature. Nurture, those influences on our behaviour that stem from the environment, e.g. upbringing, generally referred to as nurture. Historically speaking, science has come down on the side of nurture, believing most behaviour to be caused and influenced by the environment. Nature has been gaining ground in recent years, and we'll see some examples during this presentation of just how powerful nature can be. Nature. There are many examples of traits that are innate. Height, largely your phenotype, including the way you look. Your weight is partially genetic, as is the inheritance of many different diseases such as diabetes and cancer risk. Intelligence, in some ways, is the most interesting of the inherited traits, because traditionally it was always thought, if we go back to Aristotle, that intelligence was not inherited, i.e. intelligence was something you learn from the environment. Remember, Aristotle was one of the first to come up with the term tabula rasa. So, one way we can measure the degree to which intelligence is actually nature rather than nurture is to come up with a heritability estimate. What a heritability estimate is this a statistic that describes the proportion of variance within a genetic population and how much of that variance is due to genes. So variance is the degree to which a trait varies. Heritability can range from 0, no genetic influence, to 1, 100% genetic influence. Height, for example, is around 0.8, and 0.80 means that of the variation in a population, 80% of that variation is caused by genetic factors. Now that doesn't mean 80% of your height is due to genetic factors. It means that in a population, if the figure was 0, then it would mean all the variation in people's height was environmental, i.e. nutrition and so forth. If it was 100%, i.e. 1, that would mean that the differences in people's height were purely genetic and environment did not play a role. For IQ, interestingly, the heritability is around 0.45 in childhood, but by the time we get to adulthood, it's at the same level as height. This is very interesting because this suggests that the bulk of our intelligence is actually genetically based, a result of nature. Here is a diagram to illustrate. This is verbal ability scores. At age 3, as you can see, there's little difference between adopted biological parents and the children's scores. However, by age 16, the single biggest influence is their biological inheritance. So, adopted children and their birth parents have a closer verbal ability score by 16 than the adopted children do with their adopted parents, despite spending presumably most of their time in their presence. Nurture. We have to be careful here because height, as we know, is linked to nutrition, and IQ is linked to intellectual nutrition. So if you grow up in a household and there are no books, there are no resources,